Welcome to another episode of the Wild Strength Podcast. Today, my guest is Brian Krebs, and his walkout song is Something in the Orange by Zach Bryan. Eat at your bones and drive your young mind crazy. But when you place your head between my collar and I joke with people a lot. Like when I work out, I listen to like sad country music like that. I'm not like a heavy metal person when I work out. I'm not a rap music person when I work out. It's always something to that nature. So when I hear that song, like to me, that's a walkout song, but for most people, it might not be. But cool. Like I said, I have Brian Krebs here. I will let him introduce himself. And then as always, we'll see where the conversation goes.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Whitney. Happy to be here. We just did one on the Western Rookie podcast not too long ago, so it's cool to get back and connect with you after our first couple of hunts. But yeah, like you said, Brian Krebs. Um, I don't even know how to introduce myself. It was funny. You're like, "Hey, what's your walkout song?" And I'm like, "I've never felt important enough to need one." And so we had to come up with that one. And yeah, I kind of agree with you. Like when I'm lifting, like doing strength barbell stuff, like I'm not there trying to like hit the red line or do circuits or anything. Like I don't really need a ton. It's mostly just like I don't want to be in silence. And you
Yeah.
just throw on some good music that's got some, depth and, kind of just takes you to another space for a minute and yeah. So I kind of like that song as well. Kind of on the same path. I'm not into like heavy death metal.
Yeah.
That's not where I get my energy from to go work out.
Yeah, no, I would agree for sure. But yeah, you want to talk about like your background in hunting? I know when we kind of recorded on your podcast, I got to know a little bit about you. You're in the Midwest. Do you like to kind of come out west and chase elk as often as you can?
Yeah. Yeah. So I grew up in Minnesota. Um, you know, when I was growing up, I didn't really appreciate a lot of things like I think most teenage boys do.
Yeah.
And, I just thought it was life. But looking back and hearing so many people's stories about the outdoors, I really was blessed to grow up in a family that had deep hunting experience, like generational hunting experience, and a lot of access to land. So we have 600 to 700 acres of private land access, exclusive private land access, whether it's stuff my dad and my brother own or uncles, farmers in the family that we, have a lot of opportunity. And I just thought that was how everyone grew up. I just thought everyone's got their own 500 acres that they get to hunt. And, I didn't have buddies that we hunted with because I hunted private. You don't really bring everyone to your private spots, at least not then anyway. And so
Yeah.
like I feel like a lot of people that I meet now, they talk about all their buddies and friends that they're hunting together, checking out publics, doing road trips. I'm like, that seems what the average is, and I had a very abnormal
Mm-hmm.
upbringing. But that's how I got into hunting, was through my dad and my brother. Big whitetail hunters, big pheasant hunters, kind of the traditional Orange Army style hunting. And then
Mm-hmm.
after college, I really started venturing out. We started archery elk hunting a lot, and then that kind of opened up the West just to all the opportunity. And now I just want to do it all. Like I want to do all kinds of hunting. And so we travel a lot. We just got back from Nebraska on a
Cool.
whitetail hunt, and we're leaving in a couple weeks for a antelope hunt in Wyoming.
Nice. Is it a rifle antelope hunt in Wyoming?
Yes, yep. It'll be so. My wife Abby just finished residency last summer, so she's been staffing for a full year now, and now has the flexibility to do some of the stuff with me
Mm-hmm.
that I've been doing. And so I told her like, hey, what do you want to do for your first hunt? You pick. Um, we've watched a lot of Randy Newberg. We watch a lot of Meat Eater, and she's like, I want to do an antelope hunt because she's seen Randy do so many of them where it's like we get coffee, we get truck snacks, we don't have to wake up early, we go look at a bunch of antelope, and then it's just fun the whole time. And she's like, I want to do that, so we're doing a rifle antelope hunt.
Nice. That'll be fun. Yeah, I think I told you when we last chatted, I was headed out for my first antelope hunt ever. And it was an archery antelope hunt. And man, it was a blast because you're right. You don't necessarily have to get up early. They're, what is it, like diurnal like us. They sleep at night. They're up and moving all throughout the day.
Yeah,
They don't really bed down much during the day. And if it is, I think the most I saw one bed down for was like 20 minutes.
yeah,
And it's just because it was so stinking hot where I was. But yeah, you can chase them all day long. You can get multiple stalks in a day. I do agree. I think you even said this that maybe a rifle antelope hunt is better to start with than an archery antelope hunt. But yeah, that's awesome. I'm stoked for. Has she? So, question: Has she hunted before? I know you mentioned she's gotten into archery with you, and that's been really
Yeah.
cool. Has she hunted before? Or will this be like her first like real hunt out there?
She grew up hunting a little bit with her father, so my father-in-law, and he's a really good hunter and he's a really good outdoorsman. But, unlike me, he doesn't have access to a lot of private land. I mean, he has like a friend here that maybe has a 40 and maybe they get together like one weekend and hunt that place. But then it's like, it's not his land. He can't go out whenever. So it's really invite only. And so she kind of bounced around different publics, maybe go up to her uncle's, 30 or 40 once or twice a
Mhm.
year, trying, getting out, kind of learning so, like what hunting is. But she had never shot a deer until she met me.
Cool.
And
Yeah.
then obviously, like, private land, we're kind of in the grain belt, kind of where the grain belt meets the Northwoods. And so we're
Okay.
really in that broken habitat where it's like half habitat, half food, which is ideal for whitetails.
Mm-hmm.
And so, we got a lot of shot opportunities really
Nice. Heck yeah.
fast. And so, yeah, she shot her first deer with me with a shotgun,
Mm-hmm.
freehand out of a tree stand, which is like on private land. None of that kind of correlates. Usually people are
Yeah.
hunting out of big box blinds, but
Yeah.
yeah, freehand with a shotgun. She's left-handed. She's shooting a right-handed semi-auto, so that was a little intense. And
Uh-huh.
then she just last year she shot her first deer with a bow on our new farm here in
Nice.
Minnesota too. So yeah, she's actually shot more animals in the last 12 months than I have.
Nice. Yeah, that's awesome. So I always kind of like to ask, like, I think it's interesting. Obviously, you hunt whitetail maybe a little bit differently than you hunt elk, a little bit differently than you hunt antelope, and all these
Yeah.
different things. But I do think the more conversations I have with people who have maybe hunted all or most of their life, or just even have way more experience than I have, that you can kind of pull different things from different critters that you're hunting, right? So you might not necessarily hunt elk the same way that you hunt whitetail, but you can pull different things that you've learned from growing up whitetail hunting as you go into your first elk hunt. Do you feel like growing up hunting whitetail, was there any sort of benefit that you had learned from that when you went into elk hunting, or did you feel like elk hunting was just like a completely new world to you and you didn't know what you were doing?
Yeah, that's a great question. I feel like it's easy to think elk hunting is a completely different world that you got to start from scratch. And I probably felt that way too. But when you really think about it, I do think there's a lot of, I don't know, maybe it's like soft skills of hunting, really.
Mm-hmm.
If you maybe put it that way compared to like, everyone's got soft skills when it comes to their job or their career or their life. But, like learning wind, like how to read wind, how important wind is for whitetails. I think that's something whitetail hunters have really instilled in them is the importance of wind. And applying that to elk, it's like drastically more important. So like
Mm-hmm.
just having a concept of like what the wind means. I talk to people in my daily life that don't hunt, but they are good friends or maybe even like family members. And my brother-in-law is an example. He didn't grow up hunting, but he married into an outdoor family, and now he's very interested in it. And so I'm talking about stuff like, and he's like, "Hey, let's go hunt." You're like, "I want to come with you," and I'm like, "Yeah, we got to wait for like, we had to wait a couple days for a different wind to hunt that stand." He's like, "What do you mean?" And so, just like if you just jumped in from the bat elk hunting on the first, go, I think there's a lot of things like those that you would have to learn in addition to trying to figure out elk, which is, hard enough on its own, much less how do you read wind, what are thermals, like
Mm-hmm.
how to walk a mountain. I think a lot of stuff like that, how to be quiet, understanding your gear, what works, what doesn't. I think those are
Mm-hmm.
big things that you can pull from your whitetail experience.
Yeah, I think that's I my experience whitetail hunting was like going out sitting in a blind, and it was like on someone else's property, so like I never even, of course, they like the person who was teaching me would tell me about wind, but I was never like checking the wind myself. It was just like, this is going to be a good location at the right time, so you'll go sit this blind. So then when I come out here first time I'm elk hunting, and my friends I'm with are like checking the wind, and I'm like, why do we keep doing this? Like, why is it so important? And man, of course, I learned very quickly how important the wind was. And then yeah, you bring thermals into it, and I was like, what even does thermals mean? Like, I know the concept of like hot and cold, right? But like, what do you mean thermals in terms of like being on the mountain and hunting? And they started describing that to me. And I think like, yeah, you can be so close to an elk or anything, right? And then if you get winded or the thermals are wrong, like there's no chance, no shot that you even have at a shot on this critter.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that like people might overlook is like um how important it is to make sure your wind is right. Like elk, they have like a 16-inch nose, right? I mean, you can pretty much look at any animal and decide how good they are at sensing the wind based on the length of their nose. Like dogs are really good, cats are terrible. Cats have very short faces, so they don't have a lot of receptors, right? Olfactory receptors. And so elk are huge and moose are huge. Like these animals can smell you from hundreds and hundreds of yards away, same as a whitetail. But I think with a whitetail, you just like, oh, it's a northwest wind. We're going to go to this plot because that stands set for a northwest wind, right? And that's like the depth you get into it. But elk hunting, you're there, like you're hunting today, and you can't control the wind. You gotta deal with it, and so that means you might have to walk all the way around a mountain face or a ridge to come in from the right side. And someone might be like, "Is it really worth? Like, do we really need to do that?" And it's like, yeah, you do, because if they get one whiff, the game's up, and that it's going to be really hard to recover that day for sure if they smell you.
Yeah, because I mean, once you blow them out of a canyon, they're gone. They're not coming back, like you said. That day, it's a wrap for the day. You might find them in a couple canyons over, but they're definitely not coming back to that one.
Yeah, yeah, or even if they don't bail, like if they sent you from like 800 yards away, they're going to be on high alert at least for the rest of the day, and it's going to be very,
Yeah.
very hard to get in on them. And if they caught your wind from that far out, they're probably just going to continue to catch your wind as you try to get closer, and it just doesn't work. And if the mountains are so hard because you can have a plan, you can do everything right, you go all the way around the mountain, and then the wind swirls at 100 yards, and it still doesn't work. So
Yeah.
there's not a lot you can do, but you have to try.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Is the number of times I have, whether it's gone up a ridge or whatever, or even like, so I'll speak to. I was in Arizona hunting mule deer, and I'm kind of like going up. There's one a little spike, or not a spike, like a little small like dinker mule deer that was bedded down, and like. My first time ever hunting mule deer in Arizona, I will shoot anything that's legal, right? And at this point,
Yeah.
I'm just like learning the whole spot and stock thing. I'd never done that before either. So I'm like stalking in on him. He's like on top of this little ridge line, and I'm like going up this ridge and like checking the wind almost every 5 steps that I take, because every time I would check it, it switched on me. So
Yeah.
that would determine, like, do I need to come up in front of him? Do I need to come up behind him? And then end up, you get to the top of that ridge, and then what was good at the edge of that ridge was not good at the top of that ridge. And I'm
Yeah.
like, this is the worst. I hate this. Or like this year when I go in, kind of like you said, you're kind of going into a canyon or a ridge or whatever. Wind might be in your favor the entire time until you get to that one spot you're trying to get to and it switches. And it's like, what? I
Yeah.
hate it so much.
Yeah, it's hard. There really is not a lot. I think it's just time. Like the more time people spend in the woods, or in the mountains especially, I think you get better at being able to like read wind and figure out what it's going to do based on the mountain and the shapes, right? Right? Like a lot of people know, like if you're on a ridge and you got a gale force wind, right? Like you don't really have to be worried about what's on the backside of the ridge because your wind's going to go right up and over that valley, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
you got that huge wind. But then on the flip side, you can also be like, that means there's going to be some really weird stuff going on the other side, right? There's going to be like a reverse wind. As that wind goes over the top, it's going to pull a vacuum, on that backside, and so you're going to have like a swirly, really weird wind. And so I think when you get into it, you're like, hey, I know this is going to be pretty weird. So we gotta, we might have to do something different. We might have to come in a different way. We might have to go slow. We might have to wait. We might just have to wait. Like that might not be there. It might not be worth it. And I don't want to tell people like don't try, but I mean, if you're at like a 1% success rate because of like where that elk is, like he just might not be killable right now. Just like
For
wait,
sure. Yeah.
he's there. He'll probably be there tomorrow. You know what I mean? Like you don't. I think that's one thing that whitetail hunters have an incredible amount of patience because they're used to sitting
Mm.
in one tree all day long, and Western hunters usually
Don't.
don't have that kind of patience. There's patience, but it's not like, hey, I'm going to sit here for 4 hours and wait. And sometimes that's, I think, overlooked. I think how important that can be is like get into 100 yards and wait. Wait till the wind to die down in the afternoon. Wait till those elk to get back on their feet. Wait till they start sounding off. Just be patient. Just wait. I mean, a lot of people I talk to that kill a lot of elk say like, we just get as close as we can and we wait. We don't push in. We don't try to call to them. We wait till they stand up and get vocal, so that way we don't have to guess. We don't have to guess if that bull wants bugles. Does he want cow calls? Is it a herd bull? Is it a satellite? We just wait till they tell us.
Yeah, I think that's something that I'm still learning. The waiting game is, and I don't want to necessarily say for lack of patience, but I just I like to be on my feet, right? Like, so I
Hmm.
like to be moving. I like to be on my feet. And so understanding that, like, once I get to a point, like, it is okay to sit and wait and watch and see what they're doing. And even like if you watch them bed down, like maybe it's not necessarily a good idea to push into their bedding area. So like sit there and wait for however long you need to wait. And I think I know more people who have killed elk sitting a wallow, or I know people who sit tree stands hunting elk, who have like killed just through sitting there for however long. And
Yeah.
less people I've heard that they just were lucky enough to walk in on it and shoot when they walked in. So it's like, okay, I need to like really listen to the things people are telling me and understand that like I don't have to be moving all day long. I need to take advantage of the downtime when I figure out it's a good time to just sit.
Yeah. I've been kind of playing with this idea on the Western Rookie podcast, talking to people, but I have a feeling like hunting media and culture and like the on-air TV kind of set up elk hunting in a way that might not be the most helpful for the average person. And what I mean by that is, for so long, all you saw of elk hunting was like on air TV, like Primo's Hunt Truth About Hunting, the Jacobsons, Elk Nut, all these people that born and raised that have insanely cool videos of giant bulls screaming at 12 yards and a frontal shot, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
people think, oh, this is how you hunt elk. Like everyone's doing this. This is what I got to do. I have to run ridges and bugle until one gets fired up and comes in and attacks me, like Corey Jacobson. It's like that's just what he likes to do. That and
Yeah.
he will be the first to admit I've done 21 days and I've passed bull after bull after bull. Like I'll walk past 20 bulls a day because they don't want to play. They just are sitting there, you know, telling me where they are. But if they're not moving, if they're not coming in, I want just that one unique experience of him crashing in on me. And that's all people saw for so long. I think that's all people think elk hunting is,
Mm,
because the other stuff wasn't fun to watch. Like the outdoor channel didn't want to put a 22-minute video of someone sitting in a tree and then, for 15 seconds an elk walks, and that's not fun.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I think people kind of got to a point where they kind of forgot that there's a lot of ways to do this, and that's just one way, and it's hard. Like it's probably one of the harder ways. It's the most exciting way, but it's probably
Mhm.
one of the harder ways.
Yeah, I've got a good friend, James Visser. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Bow Disciples, the YouTube channel.
Yeah.
And I think he since started a podcast, but he's like he loves sitting a tree stand for elk, and I think maybe like three or four of the last like five or six elk that he's killed over the counter. Were sitting a tree stand, and he'll sit that tree stand all day. And he's from California, so he's not even a big like whitetail hunter, but that's just where he's had success. He's been able to like just get up high enough to play the wind going in to know like where he needs to sit. And like I think when I would hear him talk about those stories, it's like, okay, I should probably just, even if I don't have to sit a tree stand, right? Like, and I could, there's nothing wrong with that, but like understanding the value and just sitting and being patient and hunting is being in the right place at the right time. That's
Yeah.
all it is for any of it. So especially when you're trying to like play the wind and stuff. So if you pick a tree, which, and I'd be curious to ask maybe if you have experience doing this or asking him as well. Like you said, if you're whitetail hunting, you see there's a northwest wind, you're going to pick the tree stand that is going to be for a northwest wind. Now, if you're elk hunting, uh, are you also setting multiple? I don't know that he sets multiple up, or if he just kind of sets the same one and like hopes that the wind is in his favor that day. But yeah, I think there's
Yeah.
so much value in being patient, and I'm having to learn that because I just, yeah, like you said, I think you see whether it's on YouTube or on TV or on Instagram, like you just see the running and gunning, and that's fun and it's thrilling and it's exciting to watch.
Everyone's trying that. Everyone has a bugle tube. Everyone has a reed. Everyone's doing that method, and so that's probably is the way a lot of elk get killed.
Mm-hmm.
But it's probably not the fairest way to judge, right? I mean, there's 10% of the people that are doing the other method, and they tag out 50% of the time, versus
Yeah,
90% of the people running and gunning, and they only tag out 10% of the time. So,
yeah, that's fair.
um, yeah, I don't know. I think you just got to have tools. I just think, we had John Barklow on the Western Rookie, who is a phenomenal person. does big game development at Sitka. He has knowledge from storms. He used to train tier one operators. That's his
Hmm.
career, like doing like very intense training of very intense individuals. And his like favorite thing to say is knowledge doesn't weigh anything. Like you
Yeah.
can bring as much knowledge as you want into the woods. It's not going to add a single ounce to your pack. And I like that. I like just like have options. Like you might go out elk hunting and you might say, hey, this year I'm just going to sit tree stands and wallows. But you get out there and the woods is on fire. Like I don't know if I would sit a tree in that situation. Like
Hmm.
if the bulls are going nuts and you're in the middle of some hot action, I would be on the ground. Because then you can move, you can adapt, you can adjust.
Yeah.
Or the opposite. You might be like, hey, it's third week of September. The woods should be on fire. We're going to bring our bugle tubes and we're going to, try to get run over by a bull elk. And there's just nothing. The crickets. It's like, well, maybe it's hot. Maybe the moon phase is weird.
Hmm.
Maybe, whatever it is, maybe we just switch plans. We pull out a different tool from the toolbox. And I think that's the real key to being successful in and out is having a lot of tools in the toolbox and knowing, which tool is going to be the most effective for any given situation.
Yeah. And I think that's where I can see the value and kind of where I started the conversation was hunting different animals because you're learning different things specific to those animals that you're hunting. But like you said, you're adding more tools to your overall hunting toolbox. So when you're
Yeah.
going out and you can apply some of those different tactics to different areas, to different critters. And I think of course, like I started my podcast for education in the first place. So like you can never know enough. And I hope that I never get to a point where I am like, oh, I feel like I've got this thing nailed down and I'm going to be successful all the time. Because then I think you lose like the thrill and the fun of it when you get to that point.
Yeah.
But I'd agree. There's always so much that you can learn, and whether it's through actually getting out there and putting boots on the ground and messing up and learning that way, like the number of mistakes I've made that I'm like, man, I definitely won't ever make that mistake again. Or just watching videos or listening to
Yeah.
podcasts, like the more you can learn and put those different tactics and apply those different tactics, I think is going to always be your best bet.
Yeah. I mean, imagine how happy you would be if you're elk hunting and you find a bull, like a satellite bull, like you're just hunting, and all of a sudden you're like, hey, there's a bull bedded like 400 yards over there. I can see him. Very stockable situation. And then knowing like what you learn trying to spot and stalk antelope in the prairie with one of the animals that's like most designed to prevent getting stalked, right?
Yeah.
They can see like 330 degrees at any
Yeah.
time, and they always are in the open. There's nothing to hide behind. And
No.
even though, that archery antelope hunt that you just got back from might have not have been successful in terms of punching a tag, but imagine how hard. I mean, it's hard. It's everyone knows it's hard to sneak up on an antelope. You did it.
Mhm.
You tried it over and over and over, built some skills. Now you're like, oh, hey, I know how to spot and stalk. Like,
Mhm.
I can. There's trees everywhere. I can come in on this back ridge. I can, as soon as I pop over that, that's going to be, 50 yards. I'm in the game already. There should be a rising thermal on that face. Like, you're going to be very happy that you went through all those,
Yeah.
reps on the antelope if that situation comes up. And so, like, I think some of the cool things about, like skill stacking in a way, like
Mhm.
learning skills, doing one thing that you can apply to another thing.
Yeah. And even like I said, I think there's value in listening to the podcast and having conversations and watching the YouTube videos. But man, I think, and I keep reminding myself this, like every time I get out and I like don't fill a tag or like maybe I didn't see something that day or maybe I did and I spooked it or it winded me or whatever. Like I take something away at the end of the day. I'm like, man, that sucked. Like I was that close or I could have done this differently. But then I try to like flip the switch in my brain to, I learned something. Like
Yeah.
that day was a success because I learned, I didn't check my wind enough as I started getting closer, or I learned that about thermals. Like maybe I was up higher than I should have been at the time, and then my thermals ended up going down the ridge, and so that blew them out. And I
Yeah.
wasn't thinking about that. I just really wanted to get there. So I think we and probably most hunters are pretty hard on themselves. Just I think the nature of who we are, and we all obviously want to be successful. But I try to like sit down at the end of each day and be like, what did I take away from that? Like, what did I do? Maybe I did do something wrong, and oftentimes I do because I'm still
Yeah.
learning. But like, what did I do wrong? What could I have done differently? And like, if I find myself in that same situation again, how can I be better to possibly, whether it's closing the distance and even getting closer? Like, if I maybe on my antelope hunt, like I said, the closest I ever got was 100. How next time can I get to like 90, 80, or 70? and
Right.
try to close that distance a little bit. And that's success to me. Like even sometimes just seeing a critter is like, that was a successful day because I didn't even know that they were going to be there.
Yeah, I mean I think when you do stuff like this, like and it can be applied probably to a lot of things in life. And I think one place that it's people are really accustomed to it is in the gym. But like learning to find success in progress
Mm-hmm.
versus like success in the final outcome, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like no one goes to the gym and be like, I'm not gonna be successful until I hit my ultimate one rep max goal. Like, right? Like if my one rep max goal is to squat 500 pounds, like if I'm not gonna be happy, like that could never happen. I mean, that for a lot of people, that could never happen.
Yeah.
You work all the time. But I think it's very common for people to be like, hey, my squat went up 10 pounds or 15 pounds. They're like, this is getting lighter. I'm going to add some more weight. And they're happy about that. It's like, that's progress, right? That's the whole point is the journey and the progress. Hunting, I think it's like so evident whether like, because there's like tag punch and it can happen anytime, but it can also take a very long time. So I think it might be just a little trickier to look for progress to be the indicator of success rather than like a punch tag.
For sure. Yeah, I would agree. Even like for me this past weekend, so I spent like a little bit of time on my antelope tag. I went out for my bear tag. A part of me is like, man, I wish I would have spent more time in the elk woods than just specifically on my bear tag. But also, everyone was like, if you want to kill a bear, you need to hunt bear, not bear and
Yeah.
elk at the same time. So I was like, okay. And my kind of number one goal was my bear tag over my elk tag this year. And I was like deep in sign and they were everywhere and I was sitting water and I was stalking and all of this stuff. Just the closest that I got, I was getting winded. Or there was one like playing wind, for example. I sat a pond because one of the cattle ranchers on that like national forest area, he was like, I always see bears over here. There's a lot of bear sign over here. Like nobody knows where this pond is. There's never been
Yeah.
any human footsteps over there, but go sit this pond. If you sit it for sun up to sundown, a bear will come in there. He was not wrong, but the only place I had cover on that pond in the mornings, my wind screwed me. So this bear, you can hear like, and bears are not easy to hear, but you can kind of hear the soft, like large prints and
Yeah.
some of the like timber around. I'm like, okay, like he's coming in, and he was coming downwind of me, and sure enough, like when he gets just close enough to where his nose can like peek up over where I had no cover, he turns around because I got winded, and I'm like, that sucks so bad. But then I like when I was elk hunting, I had gone to a spot like I've done a lot of e-scouting. What the e-scouting I have done has done been through like advice of people or help of people.
Yeah.
And I was trying to find a new elk spot because Onyx was showing that my other one was on fire the other day. And I was like, all
Oh,
right, like,
yeah.
yeah, quick change of plans. I got to change things up really quickly. And I kind of panicked because I was like, I don't feel that I know enough to make a
Yeah.
change on my own to change to go to a new spot. But I also don't want to not get out because I'm definitely not going to shoot anything on my couch. So, like, what am I going to
Right.
do? And so for me, like I didn't put eyes on an elk all this past weekend, but I was finding heavy game trails. I was finding sign. I was
Yeah.
smelling them. And I was like, that was really cool to me to be like, I found this spot on my own through a little bit of e-scouting, through getting out there. And I found elk sign. And I was like, I feel really good about myself that I did that.
Yeah. No, it's something that a lot of people I think hangs up a lot of people on like, well, how do I find an elk spot? Like I don't know how to find elk. And
Mm-hmm.
it's hard. I mean, it's not intuitive, right? I mean, elk are
Yep.
in a lot of places, a lot of different habitats that kind of can like confuse people. But if you just get shown a spot, like you don't really think about why. Like why are elk using this spot? You're like, hey, there's elk here. Someone told me there's elk here. I went, there is elk. And you never think about it. But when you have to find a spot on your own, you're like, would elk be here? Well, it's got water. It looks like it's got some feed and it's got some benches. Like, my dream would be a valley, like a ridge,
Mm-hmm.
lots of grass in the bottom, maybe a river, a creek in the bottom that holds water year round. Bunch of black timber on the slopes with like a ton of benches 2/3 of
Mm-hmm.
the way up to the ridge. Right, like those elk are going to come down. They're going to feed in the bottom. They're going to go up. They're going to bed on these benches. It's There's going to be elk here, right? Like you can look at a spot and be like, there will be elk here. I don't know exactly where. I don't know how many, but there's
Mm-hmm.
going to be elk in this spot. And I think you only get to that point by going to a lot of spots that you thought were going to have elk and they didn't. And then you're like, oh
Yeah.
yeah, this one was missing water, or this one was missing
Uh-huh.
feed, or there's nowhere to bed here. Or, that's kind of the only way you really get good at it is
Yeah.
finding a lot of red X's.
Yeah, I would agree. And even too, like you mentioned water, I've learned that Onyx can say there's a creek there and Onyx can say there's water there, and there might not be a single drop of water anywhere near.
Onyx can say a lot of things, and it Onyx can say it doesn't look that flat or that steep either, and you get there and you're like, wow.
Yeah, I had a like a bear pin shared with me to a pond, and I look, and it was like it looks like okay, I can get to that. It was a 3,000 feet drop in elevation in less than a mile, and I was like, I don't think I'm going to be hitting that one because if I shoot a bear down there, I'm sure as hell not packing it out on my
Yeah.
own.
I mean, you that's like 45-degree slope on
Yes,
average.
correct.
Yeah.
And like you look at it and it's like, okay, like that's feasible. And then you like pull up the topo maps and you look at like the actual elevation drop that you're getting. And I was like, okay, that maybe it's a bare spot. I might be missing out on something, but that's not happening.
Yeah. Or find a different way. Rent some
Yeah.
llamas. I don't know. Yeah, that's a big thing about Western hunting where I think people, if you jump in, there's like a ladder, I think. And if you jump in on like the top rung, you're learning a lot of things all at once. And it's
Mhm.
just hard to organize and process that much information in 7 days and get the job done. And mountaineering, I think, is like a very overlooked part of it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't hear a lot of people talking about like how to be a better mountaineer when they're
Mm-hmm.
planning their elk hunt. They're always focused on like how far can I shoot? What's the best broadhead? How do you
Mm-hmm.
call? And I'm like, where are you going? Like, how are you going to get through the mountains? Do you know how long it takes? A lot of people be like, I just had a question on the podcast. Hey, here's my plan. He showed pins too, which is wild. I mean, this guy's like giving me his whole playbook. And I'm not going to hunt a spot, but I wouldn't
Yeah.
also send pins to someone else that I'm asking questions about. He's
Right.
like, here's
Yeah.
my plan. I want to park here. I want to walk in this far. I want to hunt this spot, spend 5 days there, come out. And I'm like, it's going to take you 2 days to get to that spot, dude. Like, I didn't tell him that, but I'm like, hey, my biggest advice is go slower, hunt your way in, maybe camp the first night halfway. But it takes a long time to move off trail. I mean, like John, like go back to John Barklow, he's done this. Like he trains people how to navigate off trails. He does it 12 months out of the year. He, skis, he hunts, he hikes in the summer. He's like 1 kilometer an hour off trail. Like that's what you can expect. If you're going to
Mm-hmm.
plan how long it takes to get there, well, 5 miles, it's a long ways. That's like 17 kilometers, right? Or no, 9 kilometers, somewhere
Mm-hmm.
or another. My math
Yeah.
is off. I
Yeah.
think it's 1.7 to 1.
Yep. I think you're right. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like, this is going to take you 8, 9 hours to get there.
Mm-hmm.
Like your whole day is shot at that point. And you're going to be exhausted, by the way. So, but why don't we
Mm-hmm.
go halfway? Like, I think that's a big part of it. And you kind of learn that when you try to dive into bear spots that are 3,000-foot cliffs.
Yes. And I think too, like kind of like you said, maybe camping your way there, hunting your way there. Like I've had a good friend of mine was telling me about a spot, and it's only I think like he's like you can car camp it if you want to. You can camp just right off the road. You get about like it's like where it starts getting really good is about 2 to 3 miles in, which isn't
Yeah.
terribly far. But like you said, if you're going slow enough and you're climbing steep elevation, 2 to 3 miles can take you 3 to 4 hours maybe to get up
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
And like you think, oh, 3 miles, it takes me 30 minutes. That's not what it looks like when you're climbing over deadfall, when you're going through thick timber that you can barely fit through. Like it takes a
Yeah.
lot of time to get there. So he's like, I'd kind of recommend, even if it's just a mile, like camping a mile in because you're already halfway there. And that takes up a lot of the time that you'll spend in the day. Versus if you want to camp from the road, like that's fine. Like car camp, do what you want to do, but you'll spend a couple hours each morning getting in there and a couple hours each morning getting out of there. And I'm like, all right, that's good to know because he's like, it's steep terrain and you're
Yeah.
going to hate yourself for hiking in every single day.
Yeah. I mean, we were just in Nebraska doing whitetail hunting. Not a scenario where you would really expect that would matter. We're always within a couple 100 yards of a road. We had a big base camp, but the spot we were hunting is like an hour and a half drive just on the road. It's like it just takes an hour and a half to drive there. So we're like,
Yeah.
hey, let's spike camp. We had all the stuff. The guy I was hunting with, we were with the XOP team that does like super
Mhm.
lightweight mobile tree stand hunting gear, which would be a really cool thing to look into if you want to do some off ground water sits because like the setup I was running was like 7.5, 8 pounds
Oh,
of
nice. Okay.
tree stand gear. Obviously, you would have like water and other things, but
Mhm.
pretty light. I mean, at
Yeah.
that point, it's getting light enough that you could put it on your pack just in
Mhm.
case. And he just sleeps on the ground, but he was afraid of cactuses in that spot,
Okay.
and so he just slept in the bed of my truck. I had a backpacking setup.
Yeah.
We camped by the spot, And we're like, this is going to save us 3 hours a day. Like that's 3 hours of sleep. Like that's the only place the time can come from when you're hunting out west is
Yeah.
sleep. And it's a
Yes.
pretty important part of the pie.
Yeah.
And so it's like, do we want to sacrifice 3 hours of sleep to sleep on a cot in a different spot versus a air pad here? Like it's not like we're going back to an Airbnb with air conditioning and showers. Like it, either way, it's not going to be ideal. So why don't we just sleep here and save 3 hours? And I think that's kind of like what you said in that spot. Like just sleep closer, and you'll save 2, 3 hours a day of sleep.
Yeah, I think my thought around like camping was I feared initially being too close to where the animals might be. And
Yeah.
that, like, if I'm there for 8 hours a night, however long, right? Like, you come back at dark, and like, and the later it gets in the season, the darker it is for longer. So your nights are a little bit longer. And I feared that if I was in one spot too close to them for too long, that like, why would they be there when I woke up in the morning because they were smelling me? But like you said,
Hmm.
if you know enough about thermals and like where you're at, if you're below them, like in the morning, like everything's going to change a little bit. You can't always control that.
Yeah.
But then, yeah, once I figured out, like, man, I would hate to be going in 3 to 4 miles every single day. Like, that's well worth your time because the more time you can spend on your feet hunting, the more time you have to actually put something down. Um,
Yeah.
and I don't,
Yeah.
I've, this is maybe not my, like, not a good thing, but I'm so bad at, like, just trying to get to a spot that I will, like, have my bow strapped to my pack or whatever, just trying to get to that spot and not actually hunt the way to it, which I'm getting better about, because last season I bumped a bull two, maybe three, definitely two, I think three different times, just trying to get to a spot. And I was like, man, if I would have just like slowed down, like kept my eyes
Yeah.
peeled, and just like be aware of what was around me the whole time there, I probably could have had a shot opportunity on something. But I'm just like such in a rush to get to the spot where I know they're gonna be, or I've heard they're gonna be, and I bumped one just even trying to get there. So it's like I've now got to take the mindset, like you said, like hunt the way there, and maybe you see something, maybe you don't, but at least if you saw something, you had a better opportunity than just trying to like run through it.
Yeah. One of the things I found that's kind of like a gear hack. Have you ever seen the Kafaru gun bearers? So if anyone, I know Randy Newberg's crew uses them a lot. So if you ever see someone hunting and the gun is like on their side, the barrel is like upward and just a little bit out in front of their face, but it's like strapped to their pack, and then it's like under their arm.
Mm-hmm.
Um, they're made to like quick release. So it's a boot in the bottom, and then there's a strap around the barrel, and you can just quickly pull it, and it releases and like falls out, and you can grab it very fast. I mean, I'd probably say just as fast as having your gun on a sling, but it
Mm-hmm.
also works for a bow. You can put your
Oh, nice.
bow, the
Okay.
bottom cam in that
Yeah.
boot, and you can put that strap around. You got to make sure you put the strap around something metal. If you
Mm-hmm.
put it around your string, it'll slowly start to rub. Like
Okay.
I had it on my string dampeners were starting to like rub the
Mm-hmm.
rubber coating off of them,
Mm-hmm.
which I don't care. My bow is 17 years old or whatever. I don't. It's not quite,
Okay.
but yeah. But then you can have your bow like you can be hands free, like navigating faster, but still have it as you could just like pull it one string, pull your
Nice.
bow
Okay.
off, and like you're now back to the same speed it would take you to nock an arrow. So I've been really liking that for those situations because it's nice. It's nice to walk in if you're planning on walking like 3 miles. It's nice to be hands free. Maybe even you have trekking poles or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
and you're cruising. You can grab stuff. You can navigate stuff a little easier. If you do like slip, it's just easier to put like your hand down and catch yourself versus like
Mm-hmm.
tuck and roll and keep the bow safe. So
So for yeah, we could get into the topic of like gear. You're coming from the Midwest, like
yeah.
primarily hunting whitetail out there, but you like to come and chase elk. Sounds like as often as you can, if not every year. What are some like maybe gear things that you would recommend for someone coming from the Midwest to hunt elk, that they probably wouldn't have just as like primarily a whitetail hunter?
One of the things that I use regardless, well, for there's a couple pieces of gear that like I 100% will not leave the house with if I'm
Mm-hmm.
going out west. I think boots, everyone kind of understands that boots are important, and I think they think about that, so I don't need to cover too much. But like a lot of people might have like lacrosse Alpha Burley Pro, like big rubber boots for whitetail hunting for scent control. Terrible boot choice for western hunting, right? It's just like something that's made to hike mountains.
Mm-hmm.
But the one thing that I thought about right away, so we did this hunt, and one of the guys from the XOP team, also new to hunting and is really only hunted whitetail so far, doesn't have a bino harness at all. Like he didn't bring a bino harness the whole time. I always hunt with a bino harness. I shed hunt with a bino harness. When I go in the scouting in my pickup in August, I put my bino harness on with my flip flops and my gym shorts and a bino harness because it's just so nice to have everything right here that like
For sure.
everything I need to tag an animal is literally like even my tag is in my bino harness. I got
Mhm.
wind, I got a rangefinder, I got my mouth calls, I got the binos, my tag, a lot of stuff, and usually electrical tape so I can tape the tag to the animal.
Yeah.
And he didn't have that, and so we were supposed to be tree stand hunting, but we got into a spot and we're like, hey, there's no good tree. We're gonna do an observation sit over a center pivot. There's no good tree, and we had a hill, so we're like, hey, let's just sit on the side of this ridge. And so he's over there. He pulls his binos out of his backpack, which is a terrible place to have binos if you're
Yeah.
actively moving all the time because you're never going to pull them out. You're never going to have time to see.
Yeah.
And then he's using his tree stand, this prototype tree stand, which is super cool. I can't say too much about it, but he was just using that as a tripod. And I'm
Uh-huh.
like, so I took a video of like when you bring your whitetail friends out west, and it's like him glassing off of his tree stand,
Uh-huh.
which is hilarious. So bino harness, I think, is something not a lot of whitetail hunters probably wear when they're
Okay.
hunting. Um, that's number one. I would say a windproof jacket. A lot of whitetail gear doesn't really take into consideration wind unless it's like super late season or rain gear, right? Which is
Mhm.
different than like Western. It's always windy in the West, and the wind is annoying. Like it can be maddening.
Mhm.
And so having like a windproof layer, like I use the Jetstream, but there's a lot of other ones out there with a hood, I think will save you a lot of like just like mental wear
For
that
sure. Yeah.
like no one might think it was like, I got clothes, like I got warm clothes. Like you might not realize like you might put a windproof jacket on even though it's 75, 80 degrees just to cut the wind and like stop being annoyed.
Yeah, for sure. I'd agree.
Yeah. Those are the big ones, I think. A pack, like definitely like a Western
Good
pack.
talk.
Like
Yeah.
you got to have like a good weight. Your book bag, camo book bag you buy at the local store. Great at carrying snacks to the deer stand. Not great at carrying an elk off the mountain.
Yeah. Yeah. I learned boots and pack are super important. So last season I elk hunted in like Solomon Trail Runners, which was
Yeah,
great, honestly, until I threw out quarters in my pack and I'm having to climb up a steep hill and I don't have the stiffness of the sole to keep my foot from flexing when I'm
yeah,
climbing. And I was like, okay, I can carry like 30, 40 pounds in my backpack with camp. And be just fine in these Solomon Trail Runners, and they have really good. Well, they're pretty worn down now, but at the time, really good traction. So I felt even fine going on like off roading, I'll call it, and any
yeah,
terrain that I was in. But the second I put more than probably 50, 60 pounds in there, those were not good to have. So I think boots are really important. And I hate stiff soles because I'm real big on like I don't ever wear like I always have super flexible shoes. I like my feet to be able to just move in any shoe that I wear. So I hate the stiff soled boots, but they're so important in the
yeah,
terrain that you're covering. And even I've done a couple hikes in my hunting boots, and I'm like, oh my god, this is so much cool, like so much better to
yeah,
just have this sole and the traction that you get from those. Like if you're on rocks, there's no boot that can climb rocks better than a hunting boot. Like no trail running
yeah,
shoe, no nothing, and it's so important.
yeah. And I think it like I'm barefoot like all day long. I work from home. Like I go out,
Same.
check my food plots barefoot. The
Yep.
only thing I put shoes on really for is like anything related to the chicken coop because it's just
Hmm.
dirty over there.
Yeah.
Um, so I like it. I get what you're saying, like that mobility, that freedom. Like I like it a lot. But out west, like there's so much variability in what you're going to be traversing.
Yep.
Rocks, stumps, slippery slopes, this, that, the other thing. I do not want any ankle mobility. Like I want and I've had a lot of injuries in football, knee
Yeah.
injuries, ankle injuries. Like I do not have the best ankles.
Hmm.
I've rolled them a couple times. Like usually once a year, I have a pretty significant rolled ankle, and
Hmm.
like I feel like I hate to say it, I'm not even 30 years old, but like they don't heal as fast as they used to.
Correct. I currently
And
have one.
yeah, and then so it's just like I have Kenetrex. I
Yep.
lock those suckers down. Like I don't want my ankle to bend at all. But I also, when you have a boot like that, like I also kind of treat my foot like a hammer every now and then,
Hmm.
right? Like this boot is solid, and like if I have to jam my foot into the side of a mountain because we're going up a steep slope, like I'm kicking it in, and it doesn't matter if there's a rock an inch in or not. Like that's nothing's gonna happen. Versus, if I was running my Nikes and I was trying to do that, like I'm gonna break my toe sometimes. So some of the stuff I've done
Correct.
trying to
Yeah.
like kick in and get a foothold,
Yeah.
um, or just like, hey, there's only like a 1.5 inch rock ledge to step on. But when you have that stiffness, like it's like that's all you need. Like this boat only needs that much to grab in and bite versus my Nikes would just curl and that wouldn't be enough for a foothold to
Yeah.
take that next step. So I
Yeah.
like I like the real stiff mountain boots. I run Kenetrex. My brother runs Schnees. I think Crispy's are right there too. But like some of
Mhm.
those top tier boots that are just that's the only thing they care
That's
about.
what.
They're like, we don't want a pheasant hunting boot. We don't want a whitetail boot. We don't care. You guys have options for those all over the place.
Yeah.
We are doing this, and this is all we're doing.
Yeah, and I think, and I understand, especially if it's someone who's maybe coming out for their first time, like the gear is not cheap.
No.
And so but I do see the value because last season, like I said, I didn't get hunting boots. I just kind of went and the trail runners, and like I'm running Crispies this year, which as a woman, I have way less options to choose from. I tried the Kinetrex and I liked the Crispy all around better. I think the
Yeah.
women's Kinetrex had a way better sole. So I was actually in Shields and I'm like, can I possibly take the Kinetrex sole and put them in this Crispy boot? And she was like, unfortunately, I can't let you do that.
You could get sheep feet eventually.
Yeah, yeah, and I've definitely looked into those.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then the
The
value of like
Crispies
a
right
guide.
up there.
Oh yeah, yeah. No, they're super
Crispies
good.
are. I don't know how to rank them, but all three of those companies would be top three.
Yeah, and
It's between those three. Yeah.
those are the ones that people rave about the most. And so definitely, yeah, if anyone's listening, like I'd for sure check one of those three out: Schnees, Crispies, and Kinetrex. And then a good pack.
Yeah.
Not that I skimmed on it, but like I don't think that I got a bad pack last year. I just didn't get a pack that was good for me. And
Mm.
I'm not gonna. People who know me know what I had. Like I know people who work for Kafaru, and they were like, "I'll get you a Kafaru pack," but it was twice the amount. It cost twice the amount of money as the one that I ended up getting. And sure enough, this year I went and bought me a Kafaru pack, and they were like, "You should have just did it last year. You wouldn't have had to buy two packs." And then I'm not saying that
Yeah.
like Kafaru was the only one, right? But like it's the only one I have found. I'm such a short person. I have a short torso too,
Yeah.
so it's the only frame I have found to really fit my frame. And it has fit me really well. And when I first tried it on, I threw a 90-pound sandbag in it because I was like, I just want to see what this feels like with weight because any
Yeah.
pack feels good without weight in it. And that was kind
Right.
of where I fell victim to with the first pack that I got. It was like, oh, this
Yeah.
feels great
You
with
put it
nothing.
on at the store and you're like, yeah, this feels amazing. It feels like
Yeah.
there's no weight. It's like, that's because there's not any.
There's not,
Like
yeah.
they all weigh 5 pounds empty.
Correct. Yeah. So I put a 90-pound sandbag in that in my new pack that I got. And I'm
Yeah.
like, oh, this has 90 pounds in it. And this actually feels great. Like,
Yeah.
I'm for sure going to spend the money on this. So I think if you're going to invest in anything that you maybe just aren't really willing to pull the trigger on, I'd say boots and a pack are probably the number one things that I would say are worth the investment.
Yeah, I think it's okay to have like take an inventory, like when you're planning your first Western hunt, and that's another big part of starting low, right? On the maybe the ladder of intensity, right?
Mhm.
But I would say like go west, like try to find. There's ways you can go west every year. Whether it's financial, time, tags, gear. There's things you can do to go west every year, and that's what I really preach. Is like it's kind of like the saying like the best time to plant a tree was 50 years ago, but the second best time is today.
It's now.
It's like
Yeah.
the best time to go hunting is now, right? But later we can worry about how to do it better. But just get out there now. Like get
Mhm.
out there this season. And so when you start antelope hunting, you don't need mountain. You don't need Canatrex on an
Yep.
antelope
Yep.
hunt.
I'd agree.
That I still will wear mine, but you could do it in anything. You
Mm.
don't need a Kafaru or a Mystery Ranch or a Stone Glacier to pack out an antelope. I will use mine, but you could do it with a lot less. And so that's the nice thing is you can take an inventory and then start small, and maybe you just put $50 a month in a savings account for hunting gear, or 100, or whatever your position allows. Maybe you take up one more shift a month, and you put that towards a new piece of gear every year. And this year maybe it's the boots, maybe next year it's the pack, maybe the year after that you want to sell your bow and get a new bow. Maybe the year after that, you're looking at like getting a better rain suit, whatever it is, but just start small. And when you jump in on an elk hunt, that's where you're like, okay, I need the mountain boots right off the bat. I need a good pack right off the bat. I need all the
Yeah.
clothes right off the bat. And that's when you're talking thousands of dollars at once, which I wish everyone was in a position where that was a reality, but I
Right.
pretty pretty sure that's not everyone's position.
Yeah, for sure. And I
Yeah.
definitely like we kind of talked about this on your podcast was like my intent in coming out west was that I'm already here. So I'm not having to pay for the cost of travel to get here to do it.
Yeah.
I don't have to pay like yes, I still spend a lot on gas during the month of September because I'm going all these places, but I'm not having to rather pay for airfare. I'm not having to drive 12 hours. I can hunt on the weekend, so I don't have to
Out of
necessarily.
state tag prices.
Yep, I don't
Yeah.
necessarily have to take off time. So like that cuts a lot of the price already just being here.
Yeah.
And I'll even admit like I'm only on my second season ever elk hunting and I do not still have all the gear that I need, but I have
No.
realized like I have a list of things where it's like okay, like I said this year I got a really good pack and really good boots. Next year like I have a tent but I don't have like an all season multi-season tent. So like where I want to go kind of at the end of the month, it's going to be like low 30s at night. And I'm like, you
Yeah.
know what? I'm just going to have to suck it up and like be kind of cold at night because I have a sleeping bag that is good for like up to or down to 30 degrees, but that's it.
Yeah.
And I've slept in it around like 35, 40 and I've been fine. But I know if I find myself in a position where it's below 30 degrees, like I don't have the sleeping gear to handle that.
Yeah.
So I'm limited in that capacity. So it's like moving on to next year and further seasons. If I want to go maybe places where it's colder or higher elevations, like I got to have the gear for that. But definitely understand that, like, unless if, yeah, you're making so much money that you don't know what to do with it and you can buy it all at once, like it's going to take a couple seasons probably to get everything you need.
Yeah, and I would even like even if you had the money, unless you don't care about wasting it, I would recommend like taking your time because like I'm the same with you. I got a pack for Christmas when I was a child and I used it and I was like this sucks. I used it on my first elk hunt, hated it, the whole everything about it. And it was just a box. It was a Cabela's old
Okay, yeah.
Cabela's pack,
Yeah.
right? Like it's not. I mean, Cabela's has good stuff, but it's not the same. And so I sold that, and then I talk openly about it. I got an Everly stock. Team
Okay.
Elk. My brother had one. I saw it like, oh, I think I'm gonna like that, and I did. It was a miles improvement over the
Like
Cabela's
about
one,
it.
and I used that for 4 or 5 years, and I'm like, you know what? This is just starting to annoy me. Like you can't.
Mhm.
It's got that internal fixed frame. You can't get rid of that. I didn't really like the way the pouches worked, and the
Mhm.
biggest thing that bothered me is like when you shot an elk, there's nowhere to put the meat. It's this big, frame pack made for hunting and carrying weight, but there's nowhere to put the meat. I got to take everything out of my bag and then put a bloody quarter in the inside of my bag and then
Mhm.
be strapping my sweatshirt to the outside and, wearing that down through all the brush and brambles on the way out. I'm like, hey, that's not, this isn't right. And so I still have it and it's a good pack and I like a lot of things about it other than that. And so now I use a Mystery Ranch Metcalf and I'm like, this thing is phenomenal. Like, it's got everything I want. It's made for the way I hunt, and
Mhm.
so it took me a while, right? And if you go out every year and buy everything you think you want in the first year, you're gonna probably find that a
Yeah.
lot of instances of like, hey, I bought this and I thought this was what I wanted, but after a couple of years, I realized this isn't what I wanted. This doesn't
Mhm.
match the style of hunting that I actually
Yeah.
do.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so funny you say like the pack I had was Mystery Ranch.
Yeah,
And it was one of their women's, maybe it was also a Metcalf. And I loved the pack itself. Like I miss it. I ended up selling it to a friend and I love that Mystery Ranch comes, at least the one I had so many pockets and I'm a big pocket person because I take
yeah,
advantage of like every single pocket that I have. And I think one thing that Kafaru lacks is you have to buy every additional pocket that you add to it, which is like
yeah.
extremely frustrating. But the frame just like because I'm
Didn't
so
fit you.
short and I had their shortest frame, like I'd be going uphill and my back of my head is hitting the top of the frame. And I'm like, I cannot keep having this going on. Like, this is the most annoying thing ever. And it didn't,
Oh, yeah.
and part of it maybe could have been how I had it like fitted to me too. It was a little too tall for my torso length where I had my belt where I needed it to be.
Mhm.
And then I just don't feel like when I loaded it with weight, that it did not just feel good everywhere. Like it did not feel good on my shoulders. And granted, like
Yeah.
90 plus pounds, it's not going to feel great no matter what pack you have, right? Like that much weight sucks. But it was to a point where I was like, it shouldn't feel this bad.
Yeah.
But I know
Right.
I've heard women talk about that pack and they love it. So it's like, it's definitely like finding what you like and what's best for you.
Did yours have the integrated load shelf like in between the frame and
Mhm.
the bag where you pop it out?
Yes.
Okay, so that was like either probably a Metcalf, a Beartooth, or a Marshall, Bob Marshall.
So then it was the
That was
Metcalf. Yeah. I think the women's
and
Metcalf is what it
yeah,
was.
the Metcalf is like the smaller one. The ones that are smaller than that, I don't think they have like the Pintler. Maybe
Hmm.
I think there's a pop up. They have a
There's
pop-up
a
that
women's pop up, I know.
yeah,
Yeah.
but the small ones don't have that integrated load shelf. And
Yeah.
yeah, I get what you're saying because you keep lowering the shoulder pads and the
Hmm.
straps to meet your torso frame, but the frame doesn't change lengths, and so now
Yeah.
that handle just keeps getting higher and higher up.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, yeah, that would be annoying. I've noticed that with mine when I'm laying prone trying to take rifle shots.
Mm-hmm.
You're like trying, your head's way back up, and then you like it keeps hitting that, and that's annoying. I will admit that that can be annoying. I usually take my pack off if I have
Mm-hmm.
time because of that same issue. But yeah, it'll be interesting. I'll see what my wife thinks because she is 5'3", 5'4",
Mm-hmm.
and she also thinks she wants the Metcalf pack. And
Mm-hmm.
so I'll just be like, hey, we got to make sure we go to the store and measure you for
Yeah.
one to make sure, and then like do all those
Sure.
things and make sure you're not annoyed with that handle. Yeah.
Yeah, and even the Kafari one that I got, like if I don't have like my load lifters down and all of that, like I've got to have it perfect where that same thing isn't happening. But
Mm.
it's the first one I found where it's not like all the time, 24/7, no matter how I have it set up. But yeah, and I'm 5'3" as well, so for her to try it is important. But if I have a super short torso, like I'm all legs, right? So if
Oh,
she has a longer torso, it might not be like it might be the perfect pack for her. But for me, it was just where that pack has to sit on my hips for it to be comfortable there. It would, I mean, the top of the pack is sitting like above my head, so it just it
good
was,
for grizzly bear attacks, though.
yeah, for sure, yeah, yeah, very good for that. Sweet. Well,
Yeah.
this has been an awesome conversation, and I always end my episodes asking my guests, what does wild strength mean to you? It's kind of a play on words, play on the name of the episode or on the name of the podcast itself. But you can take that however you want. You can take it quite literally, you can take it metaphorically. But Brian, what does wild strength mean to you?
Yeah. Well, I'm fortunate. I had a opportunity to answer this question a few weeks ago. So when we did our podcast together on Western Rookie, and so I got a little bit of a um, chance to think about it ahead of time, and I went through a couple different scenarios of like, well, it could mean this and it could mean that, but I think we settled on just wild strength. I think it just takes a lot of types of strength to do what we do, right? It takes
Mhm.
physical strength to carry a bull. It takes a lot of mental strength to do some of the things we talked about, especially on Western Rookie, where you're out there by yourself trying to find new spots, don't know if this is right, don't feel very, comfortable internally with like different things like, am I just wasting my time? I'm alone. Is this, what happens if this happens? So it takes a lot of mental strength. There's just so many different things that go into our lifestyle and the passions that we try to do. And I think just like wild strength kind of just embodies all of those that it all of those things that it kind of you got to put together to do it and to do it well and to do it sustainably. And I think that's kind of what wild strength to me
Yeah.
means. It's just like that inner drive to be better, to do better, to grow. And that's a big part of Western hunting.
Yeah, yeah, I would agree with that. And you speak to a little bit to the Western Rookie podcast. We did an episode together, but kind of speak to what was your motivation behind starting that, and then kind of what can people expect when they're listening.
Yeah, so I didn't actually start it. I was offered, I was hired as a podcaster to
Cool, nice,
run
yeah,
that
love
show.
that.
Yeah. Um, but it's a great show, and it's really intended to help people that are on the newer edge of Western hunting
Hmm.
get through some of those early hurdles, right? I mean, I felt them, you feel them. People get it. Like, there's so many things to Western hunting, and I don't really want to watch people trip and fall over every single one of those hurdles. If I've
Hmm.
been there and I've done it, and I can help in any way, help people hit their next phase or their next
Hmm.
season in Western hunting faster, I'm all for it. And that's what
Yeah.
the Western Rookie Show tries to do. I mean, we have people from all walks of life on the
Hmm.
show. We've talked to people after their first hunt, and we've talked to people like Aaron Snyder from Kafari.
Hmm.
And so I think there's something to be had no matter where you are in your journey. You could be an absolute stone cold veteran and still maybe find a gear hack here or
Yeah.
there, or maybe it's just the reminder that the Nevada apps are due, or right now Montana and Wyoming bonus points are on sale, so get yours before they run out this fall. Stuff like that. So
Nice, yeah, yeah. I
yeah,
think that's huge, especially as a literal Western rookie. And I think when you had me on there, I was like, "Am I even qualified for this? Like, why are you even asking me?" But I think, yeah, the I've found more than anything in the hunting community that people just genuinely want to help.
yeah,
And Yeah, there's some bad people who are like they don't want to help. They have their spots and they don't want more hunters. Whatever. There's a few of them, but I think I've run into some of the most genuine people, and that's been how I've even been success to me this early on is finding the animals, and then once I finally like put an elk down, will be like beyond what I've even expected. But just like to have people who are willing to just answer questions, right, and to have
Yeah.
people like you who have podcasts and resources out there that are geared towards someone who's just wanting to do like I met a guy who he came out for his first elk hunt ever this year, and he's like, I just turned 30 and I've never done it and I've always wanted to do it, and it was like now's the freaking time.
Yeah.
Like it's better now than never, and I've wanted to do it for so long that it's like I need to do it now. And he's like every day I've been out here I'm learning something new. I've
Yeah.
never done this before. I'm learning something new every single time I step out of my truck, every single time I leave camp. And I think that's really cool for people to get out and do that.
Yeah. 100%.
If people want to find you, this has been great. If people want to find you, if they have questions, if they want to connect with you, Brian, where can they find you?
Yeah, you can reach out on any platform. We do the Western Rookie podcast. It should be available pretty much anywhere you listen to podcasts. And then in the show notes of every episode, there's a whole bunch of information. But I also have just my email on there. So if
Cool.
people are just like want to spend the time to type up an email, real
Yeah.
old school. But yeah, you can type a book and I'll respond. I try to respond to everyone. A lot of times, if it's a good question or a question that's easily shareable,
Mm-hmm.
I'll even answer it on the air because I bet other people have the same question. If it's like the guy that said like, "Hey, this is the exact spot I want to hunt. What do you think?" I'm not going to put the pin on the air, but I'll say like, "Hey, this person wants to get back into this very rugged spot. Was just asking about how to do it. This is what I would say." So yeah, try to help out as much as I can. Feel free to reach out any platform. You should be able to find the Western Rookie podcast on, and love to help anyone wherever they are in their journey.